Hi, my name is Laura Mead of Prairie Hollow Creations, and I'm here today because I want to demonstrate a new form of art that I've just gotten into in the last year called Gelli plate printing. I've kind of fallen in love with it. I do all forms of multimedia art. I'm a hand spinner and weaver. I also, for a number of years, have been doing polymer clay jewelry, which I'm wearing a couple of pieces. This is faux leather made out of polymer clay. And these are prairie pendants that I make. The other thing that I do is called botanical or eco printing. I'm wearing a shirt that I made. This is actually my paint smock. And this is made with a process of using plant materials, steamed or boiled in a roasting pan or a pan of water to impart the color and the impressions of the plants onto the material. A clearer form of botanical print you can see here on the wall is a silk scarf that I made recently using material that I gathered from the prairie. Prairie Hollow Creations, my husband Dave and I live right on the eastern edge of the Flint Hills of Kansas. And I utilize the plant material on our property. We have a few acres in the country. And so I utilize some of the plant material from our property for a lot of the artwork that I do. I incorporate it in. So this new form that I have just gotten into is called Gelli printing. So what's a Gelli plate? Gelli plates can actually be made out of gelatin. There are tons of homemade online formulas how to make your own. This is actually a synthetic version that I purchased called a Gelli plate. You can get them in different sizes. I've got a giant one coming soon, but they're basically just kind of jelly textured flexible plates that you can impress images on with paint and various tools. So I utilize, again, prairie grasses, but you can use stencils. You can use, I've got these little metal kind of stamp stencils. You can use silk screen. And these are actually fake floral flowers that I've been using over and over again that I can impress on these plates to get that impression then onto paper. So I am going to demonstrate the process, but you can see some examples here of prints that I've done on paper. This is a prairie scene that I did with local grasses and flowers, and then just a couple of daisies from the grocery store because it's too early in the season to pick live plants, which is why I'm using dried right now. This is a hollyhock that actually is growing. It's one of the first things that start to leaf out. So I've collected some hollyhock. This is called leather leaf from the grocery store. I bought a bundle of that just again because there aren't very many fresh plants available right now. This is a very subtle impression of prairie grasses and flowers. And so you can see, and then finally, this is just a stencil with some paint. This is a stencil of trees that I used with just some varied colors of paint. So there's a large variety of what you can use, tools. Some people just use, household objects or little sponges. Anything can impress an image onto paper once it's on the Gelli plate. So this operates as mono printing or kind of like a silk screening type of technique, but you don't need a lot of tools. You literally need your Gelli plate. You need a good variety of paints. I'm using acrylic paints here. You need a good variety of paper. One of the things that people will often ask me is what kind of paper can you use for this type of printing? And you can use any number of papers, from really fine linens and kind of fancy paper. Here's a variety that I've been working with, and some of it is watercolor paint paper. And I have just basic cardstock. This is newsprint. It's just, newspaper print, very thin, inexpensive. You can use copy paper. These are linen papers that often people use for watercolor painting. But one of my favorite things to do, and just as a little tip, I don't know anybody else that does this, but I do it all the time. When I go to garage sales or yard sales, I will look for vintage papers, and I have found some really spectacular papers. This is onion skin paper, and it's got I use this very preciously because it's such a cool thing and I've never seen anything quite like it. The paper has an incredible texture and feel, and it's super strong. And then I found some old craft paper, kids' craft paper from probably the 70s or 80s, and just a huge box of it that's gone on forever. And then some old watercolor paper that is a different quality than the new watercolor I found. So I recommend, if you want to start experimenting with jelly printing, just get a variety of papers, you know, pick them up anywhere. Start with copy paper and you'll find some things that you really enjoy. So what I want to do now is I'm going to clean these pieces up, and I will demonstrate really simply how to do a very simple pull from a jelly plate to get an impression on paper. I've just prepared all my materials so that you didn't have to see me running around doing all that. I've picked out just a few pieces of dried prairie grasses that I'm going to use, and things that I've collected. A little teeny piece of the leather leaf that I got from the grocery store. And this is an actual real daisy that's just kind of limp right now because it's real and I used it for painting yesterday, but it's still usable. It still stayed pretty solid. So what you do, you have these rollers. You start with just a tiny bit. You always use less than what you think you need. Just a tiny bit of paint onto the jelly plate. And then I'm going to roll it on and smooth it across the whole surface with a rolling motion. You kind of try to hit the whole plate. See, if I do little bits, it leaves lines in the paint. You want to do whole stripes up and down. And you can see that's pretty evenly distributed. Now I'm going to lay my plant material on here in whatever kind of pleasing fashion suits me. I don't think I have room for that, so we're going to skip that. This is a pretty small piece. I like some of these really unusual lumpy pieces like that. And I'm going to take just a bit of this prairie grass, put it there. And then one thing that I have found is using these little curvy pieces of dried grasses really add a lot of visual interest. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to impress these with this piece of thin paper, and I'm going to pick up the extra paint that's around the prairie grasses. And I'm doing that by just smushing down, smushing my fingers down. I'm trying to get really good contact between these plant. Yeah, see, and you can see how it's starting to pick up here. I'll show you. See how it's kind of clear there. I want to clear it up as much as I can in the places where the prairie grasses aren't. Yep, I'm just going to keep. All right, that's not bad. Now what I'm going to do next, I did forget one thing. I'm going to use just a damp, I use baby wipes actually. I use them for a lot of my art. I'm just wiping some of the extra paint that didn't come up around the prairie grasses, because there's going to be another layer that I build into this. Now I'm going to carefully pick these pieces up and see what we got. The paint is still wet, so I want to be careful. Now, the downside of using prairie grass, as you can see, is there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Now, what I'm going to have to do is pick all these pieces off with my tweezers and be very careful not to disturb the paint too much underneath. Now, I don't know, thank you to my cameraman, Dave. I don't know if he wants to leave this on while I do the whole thing. This is going to be a little tedious, so we might just pause it while I finish this. So I'm just finishing with some last little bits. There may be some little flecks that don't come off, that's fine. But for the most part, I've cleaned most of those seeds from the plate. Now the next step is you want to wait for this paint to completely dry. And you can see so far, we got a really good pull. See how much detail there is in this. So once this dries completely, and that, depending on humidity, it really depends on humidity to see how soon and how long it takes something to dry. One thing that many people use, and I utilize this as well, is I have a hairdryer that has a cool shot. You don't want to use hot, but you can use a cool shot on this. I think hot may damage the plate. That's kind of my guess, but everything I've read says you should only use cool hairdryer, and you can quickly speed up the drying of the paint by blowing that cold hairdryer. Luckily, the way things are today, yeah. See, I'm just testing in the corner here, and I'm pushing my finger down and no paint's coming up, so that's dry. I'm just testing it in a couple of places. So now, that's actually going to be the front of the picture. Remember back to those pictures we had earlier? That's the front, but it's going to be on the bottom because I'm layering paint behind it now. That will be the background of the image. And I just picked some really random colors. I really don't know if they're going to work. They may just look super weird, but it'll give you the idea anyway. Again, I'm using very little. I don't want to overdo. You want nice contrasting colors. So sometimes you can use one. I like to use several different colors. And you can see I've just used tiny little bits here. And I'm just gonna start making a mottled look here. And I'm gonna, there we go. And now, I've spread that out, but it's still kind of splotchy. I'm gonna lay my paper right on top of it. And I have, this is called a Barren. These are your rollers. This is a Barren. And what the Barren does is allows me to put some pressure down to really make good contact between the paper and the Gelli plate. And it's stuck down. And now what I wanna do is wait for that, just for a little bit to see if it'll dry. Yeah, it's still wet. So we wait just a minute. And one thing I do sometimes, if I can remember, oh, that's where I put it. I will actually use a little bit of weight. So I'm using just a tile I got from, Lowe's or your hardware store, Ace Hardware, wherever you get your tiles. I just lay that on top for a little pressure, a little weight. To help that contact while that paint dries. And this should take just maybe a minute or two. And then we'll come back and we'll do the reveal. All right, so we've left it to sit. And again, humidity, temperature is gonna make a big difference on how long, how much paint you applied, how long you have to let your piece sit. Oh, I've already got blue all over me. But I'm gonna check this out and just see. So I'm just gonna slowly raise it. Yeah, you can see there's clean, no paint there. So I think looks like it's, yeah, see, as I'm pulling up here, you can see. But I learned a trick that I'm gonna show you that I really like from somebody else online watching a YouTube video. Here is what it looks like with the Gelli plate on top. And if you roll it off this way, upside down, some people, what they'll do is they'll pull the paper off this way. And sometimes I found that messes up the print. But another way to do it is you can just gently roll. Now we're getting a bunch of little white spots, and what those are from are all those little pieces of hair that didn't quite adhere. But the primary part of the print worked. So look. That's completely clean, more or less. And that whole image got impressed on the paper. And see where all these little white spots are those little pieces of grass that I didn't quite catch. What I can do now is just go in with some paint and a paintbrush and just kind of fill in those little areas. That won't be a problem at all. And I really like the texture of seeing those little pieces. It'll be kind of neat to add those. But look at the detail of this print. Look at those grasses right there. And see that round curvy piece that we had on the top and the leather leaf down here. These purple top prairie grass right here. It's just beautiful. The imagery that you can get so simply, really. And there is a learning curve. I have a whole folder full of failed projects that I can show you too, which, you know, too much paint, things just get smeary. Too little paint and you get big gaps everywhere. So there is a learning curve. I won't say this is, you know, super effortless, but with very little practice and just consistency and figuring out how much paint to use, how long to apply, how long to let it dry, you can start to get some really consistent and I think really beautiful results. And again, you can see how quick this whole process is. The only parts that we didn't record were the drying time and me picking off those little grasses. So it really doesn't take long, and this will be finished. I will sometimes put a little bit of textile medium on the top just to pop the color a little bit, like a little glaze on it. And I find that that just pops and deepens the color a little bit, but you could leave it just like this. And then you have, you know, a small print that you can frame, or you have a card that you can, you know, put that on an envelope, or I mean on cardstock and make a card. So that's one little sample. There are millions of things you can do with, as I said, stencils and other materials, but this is a very quick and simple way to do a botanical print with a Gelli plate. So hope you enjoyed it. As everybody says, so I'll say it too, be sure to subscribe, and I'll keep uploading videos on how to make stuff. Thanks for watching.